Thanks for staying with us. Now, as discussions continue about a post-election government, and given the fact that some of the parties differ in ideologies, what does this mean then for foreign policy? The ANC has enjoyed a comfortable majority for 30 years, which allowed it to shape the country's policy here at home as well as abroad. Some of the parties don't share the same positions when it comes to some geopolitical developments. So what does it mean then? Professor David Monyae, UJ Center for Africa-China Studies Director and International Relations and Foreign Policy Expert, joins us live now to have this conversation. Prof, thank you so much for your time this evening. I mean, some have said that as these discussions continue, it's also an uncertain time for foreign policy. Is it?
Yeah, to some extent, yeah, indeed, it is. The situation at domestic level has a huge implication at a global. But given the history of South Africa, one does not see any major shifts in its foreign policy. I think the main reason is that other than DA, the rest of opposition parties do not really fundamentally differ in terms of ANC's foreign policy. I think it has to do with the struggle. If you look at the EFF, you look at MK, the history of these parties are offshoots of ANC, and therefore I think one will have a continuity. They might differ in style and on certain issues, but overall I think we're going to see a continuity going forward.
And you think about, for example, the Patriotic Alliance, as well, its stance when it comes to the Middle East. I wonder then how much of, an issue could that be? Or, could some say that maybe a majority view could then trump maybe one party or two parties' views?
Oh, indeed. I think there might be a no-go area in terms of getting into any form of government, whether it's a coalition or government of national unity, on core issues that government shall pursue traditional foreign policy that is anchored in the constitution of the country. Look at the history going back to Freedom Charter. ANC-led government foreign policy, it's embedded in the country's own standing, the need for a peaceful resolution of conflicts all over the world, the need for fairness in terms of transformation of United Nations Security Council, and key conflicts all over the world. I really do not see most parties in South Africa differing with the ANC on that front. DA has a tendency of following mainly Western views, but that will be in clash with the majority of South Africans that are mainly for transformation, not just in the country, but transformation at a global level as well.
I suppose then we might then, in light of what you're saying, continue to accommodate our participation at BRICS.
Indeed, I do not see any changes in terms of South Africa's BRICS membership in any foreseeable next 5 years, as well as relationship with core countries such as China, Russia, or any other. South Africa will continue with its non-aligned position on all matters concerning global affairs. And it really depends who will be the president. If it's President Cyril Ramaphosa, I think we're going to see that continuity going forward.
So then, I suppose then in light of that, Prof, because there are some who are saying that they are concerned should things change when it comes to South Africa's voice on a global stage, especially when you think about the fact that, South Africa is quite vocal when it comes to vaccine hoarding, for example, when, during the COVID-19 pandemic. At the same time, and then you're looking at developments in the Middle East. Some were concerned that maybe if things change, South Africa's voice could be diminished and maybe even perceptions about South Africa could change on a global stage.
There are a number of voices, particularly in the Western world, I think, have seeing the changes that are taking place, ANC drop in terms of, or at the polls up to, lower to 40%. I think there's this excitement in the global north that South Africa's voice will diminish. But I think what they fail to understand is that South Africa's joining BRICS or relationship with China or Russia has absolutely nothing to do with the ideology or the love for these countries. I think it has to do mainly with domestic issues, economic issues, that for South Africa to grow, it needs to diversify its economy, trading with traditional partners in the West, but also expanding our trade into the East and all other areas all over the world, as well as the demand for change at a global level in UN and UN institutions and agencies, as well as the IMF, World Bank. I think there is a need for fairness to ensure that not just South Africa, but the rest of the continent is involved in global affairs.
It's going to be an interesting one, Prof, to see then what happens. And thank you so much for your insights. And really, as you know, also one looks ahead to see what kind of government will then be formed at national level in KwaZulu-Natal, for example, and what happens then in some of the country. But thank you for your views. Do appreciate them. That was Professor David Monyae, UJ Center for Africa-China Studies Director and International Relations and Foreign Policy Expert.